Because, like I said, man, for us, we know we still need to address this position. And we can do it a couple of ways right now. We can still double up in the draft if we wanted to, taking a guy in the first round or early rounds and then coming back and getting a guy in either the third or that sixth round time frame. Or you go and get a free agent guy on the front end of this thing, or who knows, maybe even get a free agent guy on the back end of the draft. But I do feel like it's going to be some type of combination because just based on what we currently have, we have some holes. I mean, we legit have two receivers that we can count on in terms of offensive productivity. We know Gunner's a really good return man, but he doesn't give you much in terms of the receiver position. So right now you're looking at Deontay, you're looking at Chase, and both of those guys, even though they're both were good last year, they have question marks surrounding their games. So, for the sake of conversation, said, man, let's go back and revisit this thing, man. Let's look into this wide receiver market and see, have we changed our mind on any of these players in terms of how we would want to approach this? I know your boy Antonio Brown is still available. Okay? I know this. All right? I know he said that he's waiting until he gets signed to have that ankle surgery that he's been talking about in terms of why he had to leave Tampa and all that other stuff. He's still waiting on it, Deke. I remember you told me he's going to get the surgery, and we believe him. He said now he got to get signed first. So I don't know if you want to throw him in that conversation as well, but I just wanted to make sure you were informed when we're having this discussion, okay?
He's always in the mix, dude. He's a given for me. I'll take AB back. And it seemed like he had a good relationship with Mason. Well, I don't know. Well, we still don't know who's going to be the starter, but we know things were rocky with him. I mean, I want them both back, but that's a whole other story.
And what the man you was saying is last time we saw with him was he was still considering retirement, so no official move just yet. We do know that Cole Beasley, former teammate of Mitch Trubisky, might I add, right, he's available. And then obviously we got the higher end name guys, right? Your T.Y. Hiltons, your Julio Jones. Shout out to Chester Rice. I forgot all about him. There you go. All right. Sammy Watkins, another guy that's available. Your boy D-Jax. But what about Andre Roberts? Man, this is a guy that is receiver / return man also. But I say he gives you a little bit of options there. John Ross, still available if you're interested in that type of situation. Yeah, now.
Some speed.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm trying to think who else is a little exciting or intriguing. Dede Westbrook, obviously with the Minnesota Vikings, he's available. Let me think. Oh, Kenny Stills. What about a guy like him, man? How you feel about Kenny? About to say, because he is out there also, man. Veteran presence. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here's the guys I have. Stills, maybe. I got Jones, AJ Green. You know what? I'm coming around to Jarvis Landry as long as he doesn't want a lot of money, because I do think he's been overrated for the contracts he's been given. But if we're talking about veteran presence, I think he could let a little spark here. I mean, he did that with the Browns.
No, he absolutely
Whenever
did.
I saw Hard Knocks, he was getting really into it, and I appreciate that. I think he could, I don't know, light a fire under Claypool's ass. He could help out Deontay. So he could be a nice addition if the price is right. I'm not opposed to it. Will Fuller, that's a long shot. Probably not happening. I just think he's a good player. He's always hurt, though. T.Y. Hilton, Cool Beasley. I like Sanders, too. And Dede Westbrook, and in terms of like a sleeper pick.
Yeah, he's underrated to me, man. I think that he doesn't get talked about in this vein, man. Yeah.
He got hurt. I think just lost out on finding a role with the Vikings as I was doing some research on him, because he was like a nice little
no, he was.
600, 700-yard guy for Jacksonville. But then you have Thielen and Jefferson up with the Vikings, and then Osborne just kind of took over that third role. And like their offense is predicated a lot on like Dalvin Cook and running it and play action and stuff like that.
No,
so
absolutely. So
I just think Dede lost out there. So he might be a little sleeper pick, some dude we could put in the slot. So those are my guys that kind of I want.
If I had to rank them, I thought about too, though. Travis Benjamin and Mohamed Sanu. Travis, I feel like he's been around for like 30 years, bro. But he always an elite speed guy. Return man, ball security has been his biggest knock, but the speed is always there. But Mohamed Sanu is another one of those guys where you're talking about, in a Matt Canada offense, a gadget guy that can do some of everything. Mohamed Sanu does kind of fit that void in a sense, and he has legit size. But at times he can be inconsistent. I think of him in Atlanta, he looked really good. Remember when he got traded to New England, we're like, bro, this is the weapon that Brady and them guys needed, but it never really worked out for him up there. But that's one of those guys I'm just like, man, inexpensive, another veteran guy could he tap back into some of the stuff that we saw him do in Atlanta, you know?
For those guys, I would assume you're just talking about like vet minimums, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not breaking the bank on those. And the only guys I think are getting paid out of this conversation, T.Y. Hilton, Julio Jones, potentially A.J. Green, depending on how you view him. Odell, he's still available, but we know he's coming off the ACL injury. So that's the big issue with him. No different when we talk about a Jamison Williams. I would much rather go Jamison Williams because I think he'll be back sooner and be a lot cheaper in contrast to Odell. But yeah, I don't think a lot of these guys are gonna get significant money outside of vet minimum or maybe a little bit over vet minimum, but with incentives in their contract. I mean, but what about this name right here? Marquis Goodwin, former Buffalo Bill, former Chicago Bear, you know, it's got that Mr. Trubisky connection all of a sudden. That's all I'm saying, man. And he is a legit speed guy. And we did see him. I mean, what was it? Oh, it was Joe Hayden. He toasted, but the throw was a little off. Yeah, he toasted my man Joe. And I love Joe, but yeah, I said, goody, get after that man. And, you know, I'm a little biased towards Marquise because that was my young whip in Buffalo. You know, him and Woods, man. That was my dudes right there. So Marquise is another guy that I could think of in a sense, man.
Yeah. It's just a role guy. That's the thing.
Right, because that's something like him. Right
if
now,
you
though,
put him in that D.D. Westbrook category, yeah. I like their upside a little bit more than like a Kenny Stills and Sanu at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, as long as you're not paying them a lot, it's not going to hurt us.
Yeah.
Just bringing those dudes in the room. The risk reward factor comes in whenever you're starting to talk about T.Y., Landry, like how much are you paying those guys versus where you could allocate that elsewhere. But this is a need right now.
Yeah, I don't want to pay any of these guys crazy money, but I feel like if we don't address it front end, then it kind of it kind of forces us in the draft. It forces our hand at 20. It forces our hand to potentially have to take 2 receivers in this draft. And like I said, we could, because guys we talked about earlier, Sky Moore was like, you know, if you look at him, a Christian Watson, or if you wanted to go in that first round, go a Chris Olave type, or a Chris Olave, a Jamison Williams at 20, you have that luxury as well. But I just think that if you can sign a receiver on the front end of the draft, it really opens you up so much more, because right now I feel like we're kind of boxed in to either having to go strong safety or having to go wide receiver right now in those first 2 rounds, solely because those are the biggest position of need. I think that safety is a little bit more of a need than receiver, because at least you have Deontay and Claypool, but we still know we need a third receiver. And we still know we might need a legitimate number 1 receiver. And right now we don't really have that. And at the safety position, obviously you just have Minka, and it's kind of an open spot next to him, and that's not what you really want right now. But I would just like for us to at least get one of those positions taken care of prior to the draft, to just take a little bit more pressure off us. Correct. Right now, I think that we are going to be forced to go with those 2 positions back to back without even having the luxury of best player available, or if a guy drops down or something like that.
Yeah, and if we don't, it makes it obvious who we got to sign after the draft.
Yeah, and that means that we're gonna have to overpay for those guys.
Well, it wouldn't be terrible at receiver, at least, if all these guys are still available.
Yeah.
But safety, for us, it's between 2 guys. It's between Edmonds and Matthews. So that makes it a little bit harder for us there. Receiver might not be as bad if these guys
otherwise
don't
you would
sign.
have to consider Landon Collins. He becomes in that mix, but he's going to cost a little bit more. We talk about Keanu Neil. Got your question marks around him, but both of those guys could potentially, their price goes up for those teams. Like I said, the same way we talked about Tyrann Mathieu, when we was like, hey man, if they don't draft these guys, then you know your value goes up even more, because teams are going to need your type of skill. So with that, man, I just think of Landon Collins in that same conversation, man. I think for me, man, that Evans is probably going to be the cheapest of all of those guys in reality.
And is, in my opinion, a better fit than Collins, at least at this point in their careers.
I would agree, because he has the range. That's the difference between him and Collins. Collins, I think, is a more physical player, but he's not as rangy sideline to sideline as Edmonds. Edmonds is an elite athlete, and we know where his limitations lie. But as a whole, I think the comfort that he has in this system, his ability to play off of Minka, I just think that he fits what we want. And cost-wise, he would definitely be the better option with that.
Yeah. The difference is between the safety and receiver. We're talking about wide receiver 3
Right. Versus starting
luxury
strong
type of
safety.
pick where it's,
Yeah.
do we want a veteran? Do we want a rookie
Right.
guy? Where it's like, yeah, it's a starting safety.
Yeah.
As much as we do need to fill this receiver spot, I think there is, I guess the timeline's different for each of those positions, how we got to address them, because I think we got a lot of dudes here in terms of receivers. I could see Julio Jones fitting. I could see Jarvis Landry fitting. I could see T.Y. Hilton fitting.
Cole Beasley. Beasley, bro. I think because a specific
in multiple
receiver,
ways.
like,
Any one of those guys can fit.
Shoot, like I said, even a Marquis Goodwin, man, putting him in that slot, that's crazy speed in there, man. Like, I just think of what are we missing and what could we do to improve that, along with opening up the door for us when we get to the draft to be able to just say, you know what, whoever falls to us, we're taking them. We feel great about this pick, instead of us feeling like, hey, granted, this guy was on the board and we think he's a better player, but we had to pick this guy right here because we needed to address this position. I just don't want us to do that, you know?
Your top pick right now, if you had to make a decision.
Draft or free agency?
Free agency out of these receivers. Include the cap hit too, because everyone can just say, right. I want Julio, but consider you're probably going to have to pay him a little bit more.
For me, honestly,
you were just talking about Beasley.
No, I was going to say I'm looking Cole Beasley, I'm looking at Marquis Goodwin, and I'm looking at Kenny Stills. I think all three of those guys in some way, shape, or form are cost efficient. I think that all three of those guys address something in the sense of veteran presence, because none of those guys are young. They've all been in the league for a while. They've all had success at varying levels and with different organizations. So I do like that. I think Cole Beasley is the more consistent player out the slot, but I love Marquis Goodwin in terms of his big speed and how he can threaten the defense. And we saw that literally last year, what he did to us. Granted, the throw just didn't connect, but it was like, yo, you know what that could do. That's different. We don't have that element right now. And with Kenny Stills, I just think that Kenny is a really good receiver. I think he will be a leader in that room. And he's a guy that at this stage in his career, he's not going to be going crazy trying to get a ton of money. He's trying to find a spot where he can fit and where he can compete and he can ultimately win. And in Pittsburgh, you can sell him on that. So that's why for me, I lean with those three guys because I do think they're the most cost efficient. And you might low-key be able to do a 2-for-1 type situation. Whereas if I'm talking to T.Y. Hilton, or Julio, or AJ, I'm not getting multiple guys with that. All that money's going to one of those guys. But as we said earlier, the injury risk with those guys are a lot higher. So you could be sitting here paying a guy $7-8 mil, and he's only giving you 4 or 5 games. I don't really want to do that.
My top 4, I got to go with the big names. It's probably Julio, Green, Landry at the right price. I mean, if that is over double digits, hell no. And then I like Beasley too.
But what you think?
Speed guy in the slot.
But what you think Jarvis is going to go for? Like, he's going to be
dude.
In that
I'm
range.
Seeing reports he wants the same amount. I mean, that's just too much.
Right, and that's my thing. I'm like, yeah, it sounds good in theory, but I don't want to pay that for Jarvis.
I think he still views himself though, and I don't blame him, but. Like I said, that contract that he got was a little bit too much for him.
I don't want none of that. No, not at all.
I think he's a good player, though. I mean, you talk about veteran presence and the upside of those guys. That's kind of what I like and what they could bring to the table. They may have to cost a little bit more, but if we go Beasley, then that may not be the case. That might be a little deal for like $4 million.
That's what
I think it could be a good one too.
With the 3 I named, I feel like they're super cost efficient. And is way less risk because a lot of those guys that we've named, like I just think that they're going to be available to you and cheaper. Whereas Jarvis, I like his game a lot. We know he was dealing with some injuries and stuff like that, but he's not a burner. And that's my other thing. It's like, man, if I'm paying him what he's trying to get paid, I need a lot more than that. You know?
I feel like, and the reason this whole receiver thing, and when I mentioned it earlier, is like we could go with any of these guys, and they're all different wide receiver archetypes and prototypes, and they could fit, is because in the draft, we could just draft the opposite.
Yeah,
so if we go with Landry, we could just draft Williams. If we go with like a tall guy like AJ Green or Julio, like, all right, we're not going to, if London fell to us, let's not take London. Let's maybe focus on a speed guy like Sky Moore in the second round.
Right.
Go the opposite. So we got options with it. I would just like to see a move at some point here. I mean, even if it is after the draft, that's fine, as long as these guys don't get signed.
Right.
And it doesn't really seem like the NFL is too eager. I'm just talking around the league to be signing anyone right now for some reason. Like free agency's dead.